Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm so excited to show you the 5 cards I made with Simon Says Stamps November 2025 card kit and share my thoughts on the products. Enjoy! So I did take a piece of the rainforest, a quarter of the sheet, 4¼ by 5½ and put that on the very back, and then a piece of the ivory new embossing folder on the ivory cardstock. It has just several different thanks type of sentiments just to have a subtle texture in the background. And then I used a die from my stash just to create this dotted oval, and then I stamped the wheat from the stamp set, and I used Memento sand to stamp that. And then I used some of the glossy accents and the glitter to add some glitter to the bow. It was making a bit of a mess, and so made sure the glossy accents was fully dry, and then I took a sponge and just kind of sponged on a little bit of Mod Podge just to try and see if that would help the glitter from coming off. Next, I used the thanks die to create a teal background with the letters being cut out of the metallic cardstock. I used a piece of the ivory cardstock and just cut a small sentiment from the stamp set to finish off the sentiment to say thanks so very much. Okay, next, got a lots of thanks card, and so I'll start off with the background, and that is some of that pattern paper. Just kind of looks like a dotted metal, if you will, but it just matches the fall colors pretty well. The frame was left over from another project, and I had used the distressed mica stain in the color Yuletide, and I sprayed a watercolor cardstock just to allow it to absorb that color pretty good, and then I popped that up with a little bit of foam tape. The leaf, I did use the colors of that we received in the kit. So the petunia I used for the very bottom, and then the honey and sangria were some of the accent colors that were some of the stencils. But then the very top, the very last stencil, I used just a gold metallic pigment ink that was in my stash just to give a little bit of shine. I don't know if you can really see that. Just kind of adds an extra little shimmer to the card. I did cut the leaf straight edge here and on the stem here with the intentions of bringing this further in to where there was nothing outside of the frame, but glued that down before I remembered that my intention was to bring that in, bring that down further, and then just to allow it to be clean on the outside of the frame. But I think it still looks okay, so I just went with it. Okay, and then again, just use some of that ivory cardstock to stamp out. And I did use the Distress Oxide ground espresso from my stash. Felt like that just kind of matched this card pretty well. And then I used the metallic cardstock and the ivory cardstock. Cut out this thanks on this card. And then I did use allergy droplets in the metallic color to add a couple of embellishments here. And for the inside of this card, just added a piece of the pattern paper on the inside. Okay, next up we have got another thanks card. I really enjoyed this die cut. Okay, so again, I'll start off on the very back. Again, I used a quarter sheet of that rainforest cardstock, and before I glued that down, I did die cut the thanks just to help not waste and not use another piece of the cardstock, since you wouldn't be able to see the back of this one anyway. And then I took one of the pattern papers and actually die cut the leaf out of it, and then used the stencils to add some ink on top there. And I think that gave a pretty neat look to it. It kind of started out with a grungy feel to it, and then just kind of added a little bit of color just to give the shape of the leaf. And then I took the Distress Paint Tarnish Brass paint. I just used this brush that we got a couple months ago. Has a very coarse feel to the brush, and I thought that gave a neat look to bring the gold paint in from the edges, just to kind of give it like a metal leaf sort of feel to it. Okay, so that was in our kit a couple months ago. I just got this embossing folder recently from Simon Says Stamp. It's called the Buckeye Leaves, and I thought it went with this kit really nicely. So I ran that ivory cardstock through, and then I just used some Distress Oxide ground espresso to rub over and sort of accent, bring the look of the leaves out more. The ivory and the rainforest cardstock to create the thanks die cut. And then I popped the leaf and the thanks up on just some scrap cardstock, just to give a bit of a, I've heard a maker call it like a faux foam, if you will, but just to lift it up just a little bit without it being too much to mention. And then I just took a couple of items from out of my stash to add some gold embellishments and just a little thread nest behind the thanks. And for the inside here, again, just add a little strip of the pattern paper. Okay. I used that leaf stencil again. Really like the way this one came out. And so fairly simple. Again, a panel of the rainforest cardstock. I really like that color. Then a panel of just some white cardstock from my stash. Again, I used the thanks die and cut that out of a panel of white cardstock. For the leaf, I used again, the same three colors, the petunia, honey, and sangria. But then for my top layer this time, I did bring out another Distress Mica Stain, and I thought this one in the Juniper Berry came out so pretty. Gives such a pretty shine and matches the colors really well in the rainforest cardstock. And then a little bit of color within this pattern paper. There's a little bit of blue, so it just kind of matches, ties together with the pattern paper. Okay, and then I just used some of that metallic cardstock, and again some of the white from this panel back here to create the thanks die. I did stamp out the word big from the stamp set just to add an additional piece of the sentiment there. And then lastly, just finished off with adding a couple of black gems scattered throughout. Again, just added a little bit of a strip on the inside, and here you can kind of see that blue color. So again, just kind of tied in that blue a little bit from the pattern paper. And then my favorite card, I'm going to end with that one. It's going to be another thanks card. This one's just thanks by itself. So we will start out with the very back, and that is going to be a panel of the ivory cardstock, and then another panel of the pattern paper. For gluing down that panel in the back, I did die cut just a stitched square and then ran that stitched square through that embossing, the Buckeye Leaves embossing folder again, and I used the cabbage ink on the embossing folder in order to give some green background to the square before then taking the Distress Oxide and just running over those leaves again. Then I took some of the Distress Paint along with Simon's Splatter, Positively Perfect White Splatter Medium, and just gave some extra texture to this background. Really like how that came out. Lots of colors and shine and shimmer. I did also take that tarnished brass paint and just kind of went along the corners of the square just to make it look like almost like those vectors. I just thought that looked kind of neat to give that little bit of a detail there. The thanks was the Rainforest cardstock, but I just used the outline this time, and then I glued that on top of a white background and added the little center pieces of the A and the K. Next, I added the glossy accents and just kind of filled in the inside of the thanks. And then lastly, I sprinkled in the glitter in order to fill that with all this pretty glitter. Now, after it fully dried, I did get quite a bit still flaking off. So again, I did take just a makeup sponge from my stash and just patted some Mod Podge all along. And I wasn't, it's pretty much this whole die cut here, and it does protect from the glitter shedding then. I do think it sort of dulls the glitter some. You can kind of see there's some glitter outside of that, sort of over here up on the actual card, that's not Mod Podged, and I feel like that is a lot shinier. But that was just a sealant I had in my stash that I felt would help with the amount of glitter I had put inside that well. I wanted to make sure that there wasn't a ton of glitter coming out everywhere. If you have a tip as far as sealing glitter after the adhesive has dried, please share that below. Okay, and then I did take just an old die cut set from Spellbinders I just used to cut out a pumpkin. I really like the shape of this pumpkin, and I just used another piece of the pattern paper. I thought it gave a really neat orange type of color, and I didn't add any extra color. I did go around the edge and just do like a little bit of a gold shimmer pigment ink, but that really didn't show up much. Just used that metallic cardstock to cut out the stem. I thought that came out really pretty. And again, just use some of those Ideology droplets and just some gold thread from my stash. Just like the way the shimmer thread nest in the background. Just a subtle accent back there. Okay, and that does finish off the front of this card. And again, on the inside I just added a little piece of the pattern paper just to tie in from the front of the card. And this was my favorite. Okay, and that is it for my cards today. I'm sure I'll still be working on more cards with this kit. This is a really fun kit. And so let me know below which card is your favorite card. Thanks so much for spending a little time with me today. I hope you enjoyed seeing how these cards came together and maybe got a little bit of inspiration for your own crafting. If you did, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that little bell so you'll know when I share the next one.